Welcome to the Brokers Lounge with Eddie and Carlo. Disclaimer: the information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal circumstances. Please head to the show notes if you want to book a free call to discuss your personal situation.
Welcome to another week of the Brokers Lounge with Eddie and Carlo, and in this week's topic we're going to be discussing self-managed super funds. It's a very interesting topic that has gained a lot of momentum in the last couple of years, where a lot of people are asking and seeking that way to borrow or purchase a property through their self-managed super fund. And I'm actually super excited about this one, as it's got a lot of information in it. It's super important to understand it, and we want to try and tackle it in a way where it's safe to know basic information, and we're going to focus around the lending aspect. So yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, same as you, Eddie. Definitely looking forward to this one here. It's a hot topic nowadays, and definitely gaining a lot more traction than what it was, say, 3 or 4 years ago. So I guess before we jump into it, how's your week been?
Yeah, it's been a good week. We're seeing a lot of movements in the markets at the moment, and it's just trying to stay on top of things and try and keep our existing clients well priced in the market. So this has been the biggest challenge for me, but other than that, personal life, it's all good. Not much happening except for the daily stuff. You know how it is. And just hoping to get some good weather soon.
Yeah, it'd be very nice.
Spend a bit of outdoors. I love my gardening, so
yes, very good.
My tomatoes and cucumbers waiting to be planted, but otherwise that's it for me. What about yourself?
Yeah, same. It's been pretty quiet week on the personal front, which is always a good thing, I think. So, but like yourself, work-wise, it's definitely been a bit of a changing week. I think we've seen the landscape where, we're starting to see fixed rates starting to drop. So we're starting to see a bit of a momentum shift there as well, which is good. And I think it's going to probably heat up towards the end of the year as well and into early next year. So looking forward to that, and looking forward to the weekend. This weekend coming up, going to see a V8 supercar race down in Sandown, so definitely looking forward to that and seeing how it all goes. But yeah, same as you.
Make sure you wear earplugs.
That's all right. At my age, I'm half deaf already, so it's all good.
Preserve the half. That's
exactly right. But hopefully the sun is shining as well. So probably good chance to get stuck into this self-managed super fund lending. But probably a good way to start, Eddie, would be, what is actually a self-managed super fund?
Yeah, absolutely. So self-managed super fund is basically a super fund that you manage yourself. You set up yourself rather than your industry or your retail fund that usually is out there. So the self-managed super fund is one that you set up yourself. You can have you and your wife or even other partners there, and you manage it. You choose where to invest, how to invest, and you need to basically run your self-managed super fund rather than the retail fund where you just have the money going in there, the super going in there, and you just follow the strategy that super fund has got. So that is, in a nutshell, what a self-managed super fund is. So basically, when you set up the self-managed super fund, you can direct, if you're a POIG, you can direct your employer's super towards that self-managed super fund, and then you choose what to do with the funds that are coming in or the funds that are available. If you are self-employed, then you can choose to contribute yourself to the self-managed super fund, and also that's a huge topic. Obviously, that's out of our scope as mortgage brokers. That's more financial advisors' role on concessional contributions and ways to maximize the benefits of contributions toward your self-managed super fund. There's a lot to cover around super, and the financial advisors do a great job in that space, especially the advisors here at Link, they're super knowledgeable and they know the ins and outs of it. So I highly recommend, if you've got a decent super account or you're thinking about it, have a chat with the advisors, because they will be able to direct you in the right way. So seeking advice is very important in that space, because there's lots of rules, lots of regulations that you need to stick to. Otherwise, you'll be doing the wrong thing, and you want to try and avoid that. So yeah, when you set up your self-managed super fund, you choose where to invest, how to invest, and usually the common ways of investing, it's either in shares, ETFs, or property. And that's the bit that we will be covering, and that's the bit where we come in and do what we need to do when you're looking to buy a property in your self-managed super fund and you want to seek lending to be able to purchase that property. So that's, I guess, a good intro around what is a self-managed super fund. Maybe, Carlo, you can explain a bit about the structures of an SMSF and
it's definitely a lot different to your traditional way of lending, where if you're borrowing in personal names or even in a company or a trust name, it's quite simple in terms of the individual borrowers borrow the money, they also own the property, so it's quite simple from that point of view. Self-managed super funds are a little bit more different, a little bit more complex, and probably an extra layer that's built into it as well. It's what we call a limited recourse borrowing arrangement. So typically this is the primary method of borrowing within a self-managed super fund. And the reason why it's done that way is that the self-managed super fund borrows the money to purchase one single asset. So the lender's recourse is just limited to that one particular asset. So it typically protects the rest of the assets within the super fund, which is good from a client's point of view as well. So typically, if the SMSF happens to default on that particular loan, which, touch wood, that never actually happens, the lender really can only claim the asset that was purchased with those borrowed funds. And this limited recourse borrowing arrangement is done so that when the asset is actually purchased within the actual fund itself, it's actually held within a separate trust. So a custodian trust, what we typically call a bear trust. So the bear trust owns the property. The self-managed super fund actually borrows the fund, and there's an arrangement between those two entities as such. And typically the members within the fund will actually guarantee that borrowing as well. So
because ultimately the money that the property is generating, or the asset that you've purchased is generating, is going towards the self-managed super fund.
Correct.
Not the bear trust. And that's
exactly
why
right.
borrowing happens in the self-managed super fund itself.
Spot on. Yeah, absolutely spot on, Eddie. And you talked about it before about getting the right type of advice from the financial advisor. That's obviously one of the must-haves when it comes to borrowing within a self-managed super fund. You must seek advice from an financial advisor and or an accountant as well, with regards to the actual investment strategy that sits behind the self-managed super fund as well. So
I even believe, as an accountant, they have to be CPA accredited to be able to give advice on self-managed super funds.
Yeah.
So it's very highly regulated, and it's like a niche. So,
yeah, exactly right.
So yeah, absolutely. Like that's very important to understand the structure and how it works. Would there be a minimum for people to start considering setting up a self-managed super fund? Because I always get that, we only have this much, we only have that much. So what's the minimum to set it up?
Yeah, I'm the same as you, Eddie. I get asked that question a lot of times because people hear about the self-managed super fund lending and buying a property within the fund itself. But they always say, do I actually have enough funds within my super fund in order to be able to switch it over to a self-managed super fund? There's technically no minimum limit. That's actually, from a legal point of view, there's nothing that's actually set in stone. Typically what we say to clients is the minimum needs to be around about that $200,000 mark in order to make it cost effective. Yeah. When you're comparing it to, say, the retail funds out there, 200 grand is typically the minimum you need. When you get to, say, over $500,000 in your self-managed super fund, then it becomes by far the more cheaper alternative compared to a retail fund itself. So, so 200 minimum. Once you get to 500, it's a much
So it's
much
actually
easier decision.
worth the cost and the setup and all that sort of stuff.
Correct. Yeah.
So, but from a legal point of view, there's no minimum.
No.
But it does not make sense to set it up if you've got 50Ks in your super.
Exactly, you're right.
Yeah.
You start looking at all the various costs that are involved in it, and before you know it, it's not going to be worth your while. So, what's some of the other benefits, of borrowing within a self-managed super fund compared to outside of super?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I've been in the broking space for almost 10 years and I've never done a self-managed super fund loan for 8 years. And then in the last 2 years, we've probably written about 15 to 20 mil in self-managed super fund loans. So you can see how people are being made more aware about it. There's a lot of information out there, especially like social media can help a lot in this space where people become more aware about things they're not typically aware of. So especially now with current interest rates, borrowing capacities are very limited and a lot of people have capped out on their personal borrowing. That's where self-managed super fund is being used as a vehicle to purchase another investment property that would be used for retirement or part of their long-term strategy. So from a lending perspective, when you're looking to purchase a property in your self-managed super fund, like you said earlier with the structure, the self-managed super fund actually owns the property and lenders usually run serviceability based on the self-managed super fund's income itself, regardless of your borrowing capacity on the personal side. So when we are getting a property purchased in that self-managed super fund, usually the lender is using your contributions towards the super for serviceability plus the proposed rental income that property will generate, plus the assets that you've got within the self-managed super fund. So these three...
Okay, so if you got extra money left over after the property's actually settled, say you got another $200,000 sitting in a managed fund, we can actually use that income as such?
Absolutely.
Okay,
so
excellent.
they will use the return on that investment and use it as part of the servicing towards the purchase. So you've got these three incomes to work with if you're relying only on the self-managed super fund income. Now, there's lenders that will use actually your personal contributions and personal income as well to maximize your borrowing. So that could be a bonus. Like let's say in your personal capacity, you can borrow 200Ks only. But on the super side, you can borrow about 400,000. So you combine the two, and all of a sudden you've got a borrowing capacity of 600,000. So that would allow you to go out and purchase a property for 750 or whatever.
It's also worthwhile to note as well that when we do borrowing with outside of a self-managed super fund, there's typically a buffer that the banks apply to the actual interest rate. The same also applies with the super fund as well, because they want to make sure that should rates continue to rise, and once again, touch wood, hopefully they don't, that the super fund can continue to actually meet its commitments going forward as well.
Absolutely.
So that's where that additional income outside the super fund can actually work to your benefit. So.
100%. And that's what we've been seeing. Really, it's more people going towards that way of buying their second or third or fourth investment property because they capped out on the personal stuff. And it works really well because, like we said, those super contributions you're getting are being put to actual work. You've obtained a property in your self-managed super fund, which hopefully when you retire in 10, 15, 20 years time, it would have generated some decent capital gain. You've got some good growth in that property, and then that could be a great vehicle for retirement. Also, obviously, you can benefit from tax benefits in your self-managed super fund. So that is like a great benefit there that as well you need to speak to your financial advisor or accountant to see how you can benefit from tax brackets and that sort of stuff. So it's that's really the key part in the lending aspect of a self-managed super fund. It's tapping into more borrowing that you would ultimately won't be able to get in your personal capacity.
And I think the other thing to note as well is we're not just limited to residential properties either. We can go to commercial properties as well, which where we typically see that kick in is business owners who are coming to us and saying, I'm currently leasing out the property where we operate our business out of. The owner potentially looking to sell. I might want to buy it myself so that I don't have to keep paying rent to somebody else.
Absolutely.
Perfect opportunity. Purchase the commercial property within the self-managed super fund. Lease, put in place a lease arrangement with the actual business itself, and from a longer term perspective, they own the property as well at the end of it, and
absolutely,
save themselves having to pay someone else.
100%. And especially in the commercial space, it becomes more beneficial because you can actually reside or rent that property from your self-managed super fund.
Yep.
On the residential end, if you're purchasing a property, you can't actually live in it.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yep.
it's a huge benefit for business owners, and we've done a few where they're residing in that office, they've got the opportunity to buy it, and then they do it in their super, which they've got the funds sitting there. So yeah, that's absolutely a huge advantage if people can benefit from it.
Yeah, exactly right.
So yeah, that would be basically the idea around when to consider and how to consider it, and what benefits that would gain if you go down the self-managed super fund. But obviously with everything you do, there's pros and there's cons.
Yeah.
All I would rather not call them cons. It's just things to be aware of and
Exactly right. Yeah.
be mindful about. So maybe we can go through some pros of buying within your self-managed super fund.
Sure, and I think the biggest one for me personally would be just having that greater control over where your funds are actually invested. You can make whatever investment choices you want. You're not having to hand over the reins to a fund manager who does all the investing for you, and if the fund loses money, well, so be it. Whereas this one, having a self-managed super fund definitely gives you a bigger advantage and freedom to choose where you want to invest your funds, and obviously that can involve property as well. Typically, if you've got a retail fund, you can't just say to the fund manager, "Can you buy a property for me?" So it definitely gives you
and choose the property as well.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that the next big thing for me is the ability. You touched on it earlier on, is having multiple members within the self-managed super fund, so you can actually pull the funds together and give you greater ability to invest those funds and borrow greater amount as well when it comes to buying a property within the super fund as well. So,
and it's very important to note that up to 6 members can create a self-managed super fund and pool their funds together. So it's not just reliant on partners or husband and wife. So really, you can have external members be part of it. But obviously,
so you're about to hand over your super to me.
Yeah, maybe, but you have to be very careful.
You're right. That is a very key point as well. That yes, you've got the ability to be able to pull the funds together and have multiple members. But if something happens and there's a relationship breakdown, that's a lot to unwind. It's complicated. It can become very messy as well. So you really want to go into that with open eyes.
I would love to go in with you. You've been in the workforce for 40 years.
Okay,
I'm
so
pretty sure you've got...
Fair call, why
not? Maybe one as well, it can be, like you said earlier, it can be cost effective if you've got the enough amount in there to start benefiting from running your own self-managed super fund rather than the retail fund. So that could be a pro to consider. Also, asset protection, you said earlier as well, how you can have that property sitting in a bare trust, and it protects your other personal assets or even other assets within the self-managed super fund. So that is another one. What do you...
I think probably the one final one I'm thinking about is just, and you mentioned on earlier as well, is the ability to borrow more outside of your personal limits. So when you're capping out personally, it gives you the ability to continue to build your wealth through property via the self-managed super fund. So a lot of people think, okay, I've capped out, now what? I've just got to sit tight and wait until rates come down, I pay down more debt or earn more income. Shift to the side and go, well, you can now do it within your self-managed super fund. So.
100%. I guess ultimately, yes, we are discussing self-managed super funds from a lending point of view, which is usually incorporated with property, but you have to be very careful because that's your retirement plan, and it has to be done in a proper way, taking into consideration any risk, any potential risk, because you can do a wrong investment and lose your retirement savings, really. So it's not only about buying a property, it has to be aligned with your long-term retirement plan and be fully aware of the risks associated with it. And that's why we keep repeating,
seek quality advice.
Seek advice always. So I guess these are the pros. Now, if we have to discuss the cons or the things to be made aware of it, what do you think some of these things to be made aware of? Pause.
Yeah, there's also, as you mentioned, a lot of cons or downsides to borrowing within a self-managed super fund or having a self-managed super fund, and that by no means are they meant to be, detrimental or anything like that. It's just a matter of being, like you said, aware of this, so that when you go into setting up a self-managed super fund, you're fully aware right from the start, because once you start the process, you got to make sure you're committed from a longer term point of view. I think one of the things that people need to be aware of is it's actually having a self-managed super fund can be quite time consuming. So if you don't have a financial advisor, that's going to chew up a lot of your time. You've got compliance, legislation, you got to look at your investment strategy. So once again, we always bring it back to having that quality financial advisor who's going to provide you with the expert advice around setting out, maintaining, getting the right investment strategy in place as well. Because if you fail to comply with the relevant, regulations, there could be some severe financial implications as well and penalties. So you don't want to be going down that pathway. So
it's worth noting they are, like self-managed super funds, are highly regulated. And like you said, staying on top of, you need to know what you're doing.
Ultimately, as a member of the super fund, you're still legally responsible for the conduct of that super fund and meeting all the obligations, getting the audit report. So, it's not just a matter of having the fund buy a property. You've got to have annual financial statements audited by external accountant to do that. So making sure that the investment strategy is constantly updated as well. So, and I think probably one thing would be the costs. We talk about the cost itself, making sure you've got a large enough balance to be able to cover those ongoing costs as well, because yes, you've got the ongoing audit costs, ongoing financial advisor fees as well. So they're just little things to make, to be aware of, to make
plus
sure
the
that
tax returns that you need to do annually, and like you said, you need to allocate probably. If you've got a financial advisor as well, probably it would cost you about 10k a year to maintain it. Obviously, that's a very rough estimate, but it can be costly to run. And that's why you need to make sure that it's worth the cost and the investment that you're putting in, and it will work off in a better way.
Yeah. From an interest rate point of view, Eddie, how does that compare to your typical investment loan that's in your personal name or in a company name or trust name?
Yeah, look, on average, it's about 1% higher than an investment loan in your personal name in regards to interest rates.
So not too bad, really, when you think about it.
No, it's not crazy bad. It's just interest rates are high at the moment. So you're looking around the 7.5% mark for a self-managed super fund loan. Obviously, the lower the LVR, you can get a better interest rate. But on average, it's around the 7.5%. And also from a lending perspective, the cost involved in getting a self-managed super fund loan is slightly higher. So there's legal fees, there's the solicitor fees, there's the lending fees that come with it as well. So it costs roughly about $3,000 to $4,000 to get the loan approval and settlement done.
Yeah, because typically clients, when they're getting the loan documents issued to them as well by the lender, they have to actually make an appointment, see a solicitor, make sure they understand the legal implications of borrowing through the self-managed super fund. So once again, there's another cost they need to be fully aware of as well. So
absolutely. Also, probably a very straightforward one, but something to be mindful about is you can't actually access any of these funds or any of the like if you sell the property or make a profit or whatever it is, you won't be able to access those funds personally before retirement. So that's why it's a long-term plan. It's something you need to be mindful of and just take it slow and easy and be as risk-free as possible, because it's a 15-20 year plan. Things change a lot. Your personal circumstances change a lot. The market conditions change a lot. The property might go up and down, and all these things you have to be mindful about, and you just gotta sit and wait until.
Yeah, and I think that's where we see a lot of our clients benefit. They engage, say, a buyer's agent to find the right property for them, and they're not too fussed where the location is of that particular property, because it is purely a long-term play. It's really set and forget, not worrying about it, because you're not going to be able to access those funds until you actually retire. So
Absolutely. And probably one last thing from a lending point of view is you actually can't go over 80% lending within the self-managed super fund. Look, I'm seeing some lenders offering interest only and offset account within the self-managed super fund, and then
interesting.
It is very interesting, because from a lending perspective, it's different to compliance perspective within the self-managed super fund, because and that probably is something we can discuss with a financial advisor to go into more technicalities around the setups and compliance. But I don't think you're allowed to have an interest-only loan in your self-managed super fund.
That was always my understanding as well. And so when we've seen the lenders come out recently saying, we do interest-only, I'm going...
And an offset account.
I'm not too sure how that's going to work. So, but exactly right. It would be good to have a financial advisor join us one day just to give us a little bit more background as to the whys behind all that. So
more in detail and in depth, I guess. Probably one more thing to add in regards to things to be mindful about is you can't, as we said earlier, live or reside in the property if it's a residential property, and also you can't do major structural renovations for the property. So you can't just buy a rundown property and do massive renovations for it, and so you have to be very careful to abide within these regulations and rules, because it can be quite costly and big fines are involved if you and especially it's audited every year, so you have to be very careful what you do and how you do it.
So I guess in a nutshell, there's lots of benefits of borrowing through a self-managed super fund, but there's a lot of things you still need to be fully aware of and get good quality advice around that before you start heading into that territory.
100%. And the best way to avoid this is to actually seek financial advice and seek legal advice and get the professionals to do things their way, because that would save you a lot of headache and a lot of trouble. And probably I would end with a case which we've got going on now, where a guy purchased the property in his self-managed super fund probably a year ago, and now he is living in Singapore and working there. And part of the regulations is you have to be a resident of Australia. So you can't, even if you're a citizen, you have to actually reside in Australia. You're not allowed to be living overseas and earning income overseas. And then that's where a financial advisor will know what to do and how to do it, and maybe add a member who resides in here to resolve the problem. But the customer wasn't aware of it. So
good scenario to highlight, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So probably we've said it 10 times already, so I'll say it one more time. Seek financial advice. It's very important. Speak to someone professional in this space in particular, because it's very regulated. There's a lot of things to know and navigate. So yes, if you want to go down this path, do it the right way.
Yeah, exactly right. So I think we've covered a fair bit today, Eddie, and I'm sure we could continue on for ages with regards to self-managed super funds, but we
don't want to bore people.
Exactly right. So thank you again for today, and thanks to all the listeners out there, and continue to listen to our podcast, subscribe to our podcast, enjoy it, give us some feedback as well. And obviously, most of all, give us that 5-star rating that we'd love to have. So until next time, we'll catch you later.
Nailed it. Thank you.